It's time for New York City baseball, past, present, and future.
We're back. New York City baseball, past, present, and future. My co-host, Wayne Unger. I'm Ralph Tyko. How you doing, Wayne?
I'm doing okay. It's baseball season.
Oh, yeah, the opening day week, and it seems like every day is opening day for somebody. Yankees haven't opened at home yet, have they?
Yes, they have.
Oh, they have. They played Houston, but that was at home. Is that the idea? I guess
they lost. They lost yesterday, and right now, the last time I looked, I think they were up. I think they were up like 9-5. They were up 5-1, and it was they were up 6-1, and it was 6-5, and now it's 9-5. So either the bats are thundering, or because of the cold weather, the pitchers can't get a good grip on the ball and are not rotating as well as they'd like to.
Right. Well, I had a thought that our different ideas about predicting baseball, what's going to come up this year, you're strictly by the numbers, as far as I know.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not strictly by the numbers. But I analyze a lot by the numbers, but I don't necessarily predict just by the numbers. I believe very much in the eyeball. There might be some numbers that I might think have some value to them as far as predicting. Actually, I remember many years ago, and this is going back to the early 80s, guys would predict how teams would do for the season, and I forget who it was, but somebody had written that a team that won an inordinate amount of one-run games and extra inning games, look for them to drop. Look for them to drop. It's just not something.
It all evens out, that kind of thing.
Yes, of course. You got to take that with a grain of salt. Maybe with better teams, but with teams that just if a team doesn't have the bullpen. You know what? They're not going to win a lot of one-run games. They're not going to win a lot of extra inning games, and that's going to happen 2 years in a row if their bullpen sucks 2 years in a row.
Let me give you an example of what I was talking about. The Mets game the other day. It was the second game because they lost the first game. No, it was the first game. Neil Walker hits a two-run home run. First game as a Met. And in his first closing opportunity, Familia goes against Kansas City and against Gordon, who was his nemesis last year, cruises to a nice save. So whatever numbers, the way I look at it, with a start like that for Neil Walker and a mindset of, here I am, first time out, that kind of thing. And I think whatever the numbers project for those two guys, you can change them just because their heads were changed. Familia had to live with that all winter long. And I think that's going to make a difference. I mean, you can't say one game, this, that, and the other thing. One game could really mean something, especially to a guy like Walker coming in. First time, first experience, a new team. I think the numbers that we use to predict how people are going to do don't really reflect how they're used, the situation they're in, new manager, new teammates, there's all new ballpark, all kinds of adjustments to new cities. Some guys don't play well in big cities like New York. Some guys do. So you could take somebody coming into New York like Span, for instance. Not Span, but I can't think of who I was thinking about. I think for individual cases, their heads make a big difference and determine how the season is going to go along the way, as opposed to just the numbers. That sounds like rattling away. Just to say that the players are human, they're not you can't calculate them because of their humanity. Horses you can, because they're not human and their heads don't come into it, and they're going to run the same way no matter what it is. But with baseball players and humans, their heads play such a big part in it. Does that make any sense to you at all?
Well, I mean, Walker hit a home run in his second game. He went 0 for 4 in the first game.
Yeah, you're right, but he won that second game. Right.
But I'm just saying, and the other thing is, I mean, Familia, he's a closer. And, a closer needs to be able to shake that off. And it was the end of the year.
Some do and some don't.
Well, those are the ones that are unsuccessful. But I just, for me, listen, some of the things, had some validity. I mean, a lot has to do with how a player is used. I had a phone call last week from a friend of mine. And he actually lives in Ireland. He's from Jackson Heights, though. He lives in Ireland now. And he was picking my brain for fantasy picks. And, well, actually for guys he already picked. And he goes, and what about this guy in Colorado, Trevor Story? What can you tell me about him? And I said, well, I said, he's going to play. He was either the number one or the number two prospect. He's in Colorado. That might help, but you don't know how. But then he said he read somewhere to be on the lookout for their number two guy, that in case this guy's Story falters. I said, yeah, but you don't want to pick a guy like that because right away he's not going to play. So the important thing is whether you play or not. You can try to pick all the sleepers you want. If you don't think they're going to play. If they're not going to play, it's not going to help you. Right. So, of course, that has a lot to do with it. But, this is that time of year where, batting averages, ERAs can change in an instant. And I'll tell you what, and it's funny. I just pulled up the stat leaders, right now. And when I looked at it an hour ago, Mark Trumbo is leading Major League Baseball with an 800 batting average. Of course, now he must have had a couple of at-bats. Now he's only he's tied for the lead in the AL with a 571 batting average. But we know he's not going to hit 571. I mean, I'm actually looking at the top 5 guys in the AL. And I'd say I don't think any of them, none of them will be in the top 5. Maybe someone like Ian Kinsler might be in the top 10, maybe, on the National League side. The only guy in the top 5 who we might see there at the end of the year is D. Gordon. So, I mean, Robinson Cano is not going to lead the American League with home runs, but he's got 4 already. And the same thing for that kid Story in Colorado. He's not going to lead the NL in home runs, but it's a great story. Speaking of D. Gordon, I saw him last night. I was watching the Marlins Tigers game, and I don't know. I think we know he's fast. I think he got even faster. Okay, I saw him on the bases. He had 2 triples and a double. It was almost like watching that. When he looked when he was like on his way to second base and both balls went to the right field corner, and it was like when he glanced over to right field as he was approaching second base and he saw it was almost like watching a car kick in a turbocharger. Okay, it was like they kicked in the nitrous. It was it was like whoa. It and like I say, so it was something you notice. But I'm sorry, you were about to say something. Go ahead, Ross.
No, well, I don't know, but he should have been looking at his third base coach, not over his shoulder.
He was, well, you know what? He was going into second. He should be, so he had the view. He wasn't like looking, he was looking to the right, and he was looking to see how the ball was being played.
That's
but no, well, he was going. I don't think at that point, maybe he couldn't pick. It's hard to say whether or not you picked the guy up, but bottom line is he made it into third, standing up both times.
Right, and I'm sitting here with the telephone in my ear, so who's, what I'm saying? I'm criticizing the guy for, and that's fundamental stuff that, also from way back, we didn't even start to look at stats until guys had like 100 at-bats to see how the season was shaping up. Do you remember that, those days before fantasy and all that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I believe sometimes you would get lucky, and in the middle of the week they would have they would have batting leaders, but it would be like the top 10, in batting average, and they might have some leaders in runs.
No,
and
but I mean,
RBIs.
as fans, we didn't really consider the early stats until you got the law of numbers behind you a little bit, and you'd say, well, it's 100 at-bats. Let's really see how when it gets to that, you can say, well, this guy's having a bad year, and that's 100 at-bats.
I have to
what's
confess,
going on?
I have to confess, I looked at the stats, the leaders, as soon as they were posted. And, of course, they would have that long list of everyone who qualified for ERA, as well as qualified, for anyone who qualified for the ERA title or the batting title was listed in the Sunday stats.
Well,
but I looked all the time.
You and I had a conversation the other day about why I was trying to explain to you why I wasn't ever a good fantasy league manager, GM/GM. Reason being, just what I was talking about. I'd make stupid decisions real quick when a guy had maybe 20, 30 at-bats. Guy's going bad, and somebody offers me a trade for something. That was my MO, not to let it ride out and see how the season was going. So if I did fantasy again someday, that's what I'm gonna plan. Not to make any moves whatsoever until you get some real law of large numbers going, and that's about it.
Well, I mean, really, what you need to find a balance. Okay, you can't really stick all one way or all the other. You have to find a balance. And I'll give you an example. My team, I don't do fantasy. I do stat replay, and so my team is like, I tell you, my team is like either the first or second best team on paper in my league. Okay, but I'm doing horrible. I mean, and my team is not hitting, and you know what? It's not like I can make a trade to upgrade my guys on paper, and I'm not going to. I made one trade. I sacrificed. I felt as though I needed to lengthen my bullpen a little bit. I made a trade there. I think it helped a little bit, but my team just still isn't hitting, and it's not like I can make a trade to get somebody who's going to hit because I don't know. Like the numbers say that my guy should be hitting more. So,
Anyway,
I'm
going to use Neil Walker and Familias as my my prototypes for my little theory. And yes, it was the second game, but it was much more important than the first game for the Mets when Neil Walker hit those home runs, because they already sat through the flag waving thing in the first game, and before the second game, they had to sit in Kansas City for a day, and then before the second game, they had to watch everybody on Kansas City get their rings. So to not come back with a great game and not have a win would not have started the season very well for them. So, and I really think that this is whatever. Let's just say whatever Neil Walker was projected to hit this year, 256, 260, add another 10 points to it. Just my theory. Could be wrong. You could take some off for Canseco too, because he had a horrible beginning.
You mean Cespedes, and I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Liz, like, how do you put how do you put that? So like, if you think these first two games are like setting the tone,
not just the first two games, not necessarily because they're the first two. I guess it is because they're the first two games, but the significance of playing against Kansas City for Familia after the World Series, it's got to mean something big. And again, that comeback game, that second game when you just need to even the score on the road after watching all that crapola, all the ceremonies and standing at the foul line, the world champion, blah, 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 blah. I think it was a big thing for Walker, and I think it was a big thing. I just, I said that's my thing for the week. I'm going to follow those two guys all year, as I would anyway. But Walker won me over, and I think it's very important to win New York over quickly for a player coming in. And I can think of Ed Whitson and others who just didn't do well under New York conditions, and that includes the press. And with that, from that be said, I love the Mets, and I want Harvey to do very well, as I do all New York Mets. But I don't like this guy. There's something long-term about this guy that everything that comes up, be the pitching rotation, be how many innings, this, that, and the, he always starts out saying something stupid that he has to backtrack from. And he's got another thing going, and I understand that New York press, the headlines, I get the Daily News headlines on Facebook. They have a little section there where they were cruel. They were comical and cruel. You got to be able to roll with the punches in New York. I don't think Harvey's going to do well long term. I think DeGrom I love. Syndergaard, tremendous outing yesterday. I don't think it's going to be Harvey in the long term. That's going to be the quote Tom Seaver of that group. I think he's going to be more like Nolan Ryan. That's just off the top.
Well, I don't know if he's going to be Nolan Ryan, but I tell you what, I would think because he's got the most amount of service time and his salary is going to escalate, before the others, or always be higher than the others. I think if they ever do decide to trade one of them, you would have to say that he would, if he continues to be successful, he'll be the most likely candidate.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was any real traction to this, but there were like rumors going around about Matt Harvey for Mookie Betts in the off season. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, I said the Mets should jump on that.
Well, all things considered, if you trade a pitcher for a position player, you're generally going to make out much better. That's just generally speaking. I think that would have been a great. That was before they signed Cespedes, of course.
Of course, way before.
Yeah, and I just have a feeling, you just too many things have come up. Too many little things either irritate him or he's irritating other people. One way or the other. And having Steve Boras as an agent isn't winning you any popularity contests with the front office right from the start.
Well, Scott Boras, but a lot of the stuff
Scott
that
Boras.
Came up with
Boras is a pretty good third baseman.
Yes, the stuff that came up with the innings limit. You know what? The Mets themselves have talked about it. So, but all of a sudden, when Harvey and his agent talked about it, it was like, there was flack. Okay?
Right.
But it was the Mets themselves, that, originally alluded to it, and they were not the first team to even speak of or act on something like that. Yes, he was a little thin-skinned. You know what it is? And they said it today on radio in New York. He's become the new Page 6 poster boy. Page 6 is like, sort of like the gossip, the whisper page of the New York Post. And, and he's kind of replaced A-Rod as New York baseball's lightning rod. So,
well,
some of it is deserving and some of it isn't.
The only thing else I want to call attention to before asking you for your New York fantasy good bets, and maybe I'll ask you that now. Who are either the Mets or the Yankees? Who are Wayne Unger's good bets for the fantasy season?
Good bets? Are we talking about
good? A lot of bang for your buck. Let's put it that way. Either draft a guy higher or spend a little more money for him because they're going to be worth it. Wow.
You see, I kind of have like an unfair advantage at this point because we've been through spring training. We've gone through a couple of games. Starlin Castro would have to stick out on the Yankees.
Okay.
And you gotta like Conforto. I don't think he went as cheap as you might think though in the fantasy leagues. I think a lot of fantasy guys were pretty high on him. Who else?
I like Lagares to come back and have a very, very, very decent year. He looks healthy.
You see, Lagares is not a guy I would pick for fantasy because it goes back to the notion is he going to get the playing time. I tell you what though. I tell you who might be a sleeper. Who probably would be all right. I tell you who probably. Two guys who might be a sleeper. One guy probably went for a little more money than the others, I guess, in the values, is Curtis Granderson and Carlos Beltran. Two aging guys. If Beltran is healthy, I think you're looking at 35, 40 doubles and 20 home runs. And if walks are a category, not bad either. And Curtis Granderson is well. I read a very, very interesting article about ESPN. You go to ESPN.com about their home run tracker. And basically it tracks home runs, ones that were just enough, ones that were monstrous. And Curtis Granderson was a guy who was listed as, he had bad luck as far as home runs go. Okay, and they expect him actually to hit more. And I believe he hit, what did he hit last year? He hit 20-something? Oh, I think we have company.
Is that you, John Springer?
It's me, yeah, hi.
Hey, how are you? We
Good,
tell
good.
the audience we've got a guest. He is a fellow who wrote a book about something that I have an inordinate interest about. I've been a uniform number junkie all my life and a Met fan junkie all my life. Come to find out that my Facebook friend wrote a book in 2008 called The Mets by the Number, The History of the New York Mets by the Numbers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it is coming out. We have a revised edition coming out, and I get to chat about something that I used to do as a kid. As a 25, 28-year-old, when the Mets were about 30 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, I'd get press guides, and I would put together in a press guide, they had the all-time Mets listed, and I'd try to figure out what every player's numbers were. Not only for instance, U.B. Brooks, who had about 5, 6 different numbers playing as a Met. Am I right?
He had three different numbers, but yes.
a high number for a while, and then it came down. And I also remember there was one Met that the number was never identified what he had, because somebody wrote a book on Met numbers, an Italian guy, Diamaco or something like that, way back. And
Dennis D'Agostino.
Dennis, yes, okay. Did you get from his book? Did you get knowledge from his book?
I did, yeah, and the origins of the project was pretty much what you did, and I found that book fairly early. Once I started to get serious about sort of figuring out all the uniform numbers. Dennis's book was one of the first I got, and I actually have a copy here. I just reached over to the shelf and got it. And I think the guy you're thinking of, who he didn't have a number for, was that Mike Bishop?
No, it was
Johnny Murphy.
Coach. Early on, the Mets had his name was Johnny Murphy. He was an old relief pitcher, and they brought him in as a pitching. I don't remember.
Johnny was a front office guy, and you're right, an old relief pitcher from the 30s, I think.
With the Yankees.
Boston, and he had a temporary position, as a coach I think it was near the end of the 67 season. It might have been 68. And you're right, Dennis didn't know his number.
I think it was earlier on. I think it was 63 or 4 maybe, but it was real early. It was early, and I don't think that Dennis ever came up with his number. I don't think
I did either. I think that's one of the mysteries. We don't make a big deal about that one, but that is one.
So I'm gonna have to go to my grave curious. Is that the idea? I'm just not going.
I'm afraid so.
I'm
that
not
is
going
one of the,
until this is solved. I don't.
even if you look it up, Murphy is not one of these guys who's identified as a coach, because he was only there for a short period of time. And in sort of an unofficial way, not exactly the same, but not dissimilar to the way you see today when the minor league season ends and some of the minor league ball players get called up to the 40-man roster in September and can be on the team. They bring up coaches and they give those guys numbers too. There's like Juan Lopez, and you see some of these guys come up now and again. And I sort of made the rules up for my own project, and I decided at some point that those guys don't really count. So,
okay.
although we know some of these guys' numbers, my project is focused on the players and the field staff who are official field staff. So, unfortunately, a guy like Johnny Murphy's going to slip through the cracks. If I knew it, we would know it, but that's one of the very few mysteries I was unable to solve.
Okay.
Sorry about
that. Well, not many people would think to ask you that question.
You're right. You know your stuff, no doubt.
All right. Not that I know my stuff, it's that I don't know. You grew up in Brooklyn, or you I know you're living in Brooklyn.
Right, I live in Brooklyn now. I grew up on Long Island. I was born into a family. My dad was an old Brooklyn Dodgers fan. Became a Met fan. I have an older brother who's 7 years older than me, and so I grew up, and those two guys were into the Mets. And I can't remember when I wasn't a Mets fan. But my
hey, John,
reference,
meet my co-host Wayne Unger, John Springer.
Hey, Wayne.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good. Glad to talk to you.
Wayne's a Yankee fan, and we're both in Jackson Heights in Queens. So,
okay.
What part of Long Island did you grow up in?
Right outside of Huntington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I grew up there. I've been now in the city for I guess close to 20 years. And here in Greenpoint for about 12. So that's where I am now.
What inspired you with the project? Were you like I am, a numbers freak? And
Yep. It really just as you described it. I just I have no facility with math or any of those things, but I just always were able to sort of associate the players who I watched with the uniform numbers they wore. And, kind of going back to the beginnings of the project, I had ruptured my Achilles tendon, and I was on crutches, and I was sort of at my visiting my parents' home. They had retired up to Maine and had nothing to do. And so I kind of sat down and I found a bunch of these old score books my dad had and started going through these things. And I thought that I knew, I could recite any number of any player, whoever was on the team. And I was astonished to find out sort of how many guys who I had no memory of, guys who I remembered incorrectly, all those other things. And I just started doing that, and I published a list of it on the Internet. This is back in the early days of the Internet, going back to the late 90s, I guess. And from there, I started writing about,
I think I saw that. I'm sure I did see that. It was it was a site.
It's still there. It's a little bit different than it used to be. But it was called Mets by the Numbers, the website, and that was up for 10 years before the book came up, and the book came up only because through that I met a guy named Matthew Silverman.
He's been a guest and a great Met fan.
Okay.
Yes.
So Matt was convinced that this would be a book, and I thought, this is not a book. But he had an interest in it in as much as he was working as a freelance baseball book writer, and thought he could sell to the publisher the idea of if you could do a Mets by the numbers, you could do a Yankees by the numbers, you could do a Red Sox by the numbers, you could do a Cubs by the numbers, so forth. And sure enough, he did. And so Matt and I worked together on the first book, and again on this book. Although we had totally sort of rewritten the thing. Since 2008, there's been another 300 plus players who've been on the Mets. So I had a chance to kind of redo the whole thing and look again at it and everything like that. But uniform numbers are interesting because they if you look at them the right way, they really can provide a kind of a side door into the history of the team. And if you write, as I did, from from chronologically, but rather number-wise, it's a different way to sort of arrange things, and that was sort of the conceit of it, and it's kind of been fun, and I got a little reputation as the guy who knows about uniform numbers.
As you know, I haven't seen the book, but if the name Jim Beauchamp doesn't come up, then I'm on the wrong page.
He was the number 24 who put aside 24 when Willie Mays came around.
Willie Mays, absolutely.
Yeah.
Who was it? Cranepool, 14, when Hodges came in. I think Cranepool went from 14 to 21.
No, I think Cranepool was number 7.
Yeah, Cranepool.
Okay.
Yeah, Cranepool actually was 21 when he came up, and
then
moved
Spahn.
to 7 with Warren Spahn. Correct.
Right.
Correct. The guy who moved aside 14 when Hodges came back to manage was Swoboda.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
We had Ron Swoboda on the show a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Small world, this baseball stuff, huh?
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
So, what do you do when you're not writing baseball books?
I'm an editor at a publication in New York. I write about the business of food. Basically, I'm a supermarket expert.
Really?
Of all things.
That's very interesting.
It's just sort of how things go. I started my career as a sports writer for a small newspaper, and just kind of fell into writing about business when I got to New York in the 90s, and that's sort of become my thing now. So I've been covering the supermarket business for a long time.
Well, let me ask you this: what's the best frozen pizza, if there is a best frozen pizza? That might be an oxymoron.
That's a little bit out of my purview, but I don't know.
All right.
I'm not a frozen.
And Wayne would not know from frozen pizzas. That's for damn sure.
Well, you know what? I can tell you that for me, no, I have had frozen pizza.
Really? Okay.
But I haven't had it I haven't bought it in years. But when I was buying it, California Pizza Kitchen was probably my favorite. But pizza is very subjective, but there's a lot of really, really bad. I mean, I don't think any frozen pizza is good. It's just some that's, it's either just barely acceptable or horrible. So
correct. Yeah, I would agree with that. Although the thing in the food business today is healthy and all that stuff. So there's a whole new breed of pizzas that are gluten-free and all that other stuff. And there's a big movement for people who don't know how to cook and all this other stuff. So there's a little bit of life in that frozen food still, but it's But you guys, Ralph, you grew up in Jackson Heights. You're not a frozen pizza guy, I know that.
No, I'm not. But I live in California, so there are times. There are times for convenience too, and California just doesn't have as good pizza as there is in New York. It's not a myth. Yeah. New York has the best pizza. I don't know if it's the water or the cheese. I don't know.
A lot of people say it's the water. And when I lived in Florida, I remember there was a pizza store, and there was a bagel guy that had drums of New York City water shipped down. And from what I understand, that's like a little niche industry, like, bakers in in other places, particularly Florida, do have the water shipped in drums. So
you gotta have authenticity.
Yeah, well, I tell you what. I don't really like beer, but when I lived in Florida, once in a while I would have a beer, and the beer that was brewed locally in Florida was horrible, and everybody said it was because of the water.
Interesting.
So, and by the way, John, you live in Greenpoint, and since you're kind of in the food business, have you treated yourself to Peter Pan Donuts yet?
I've been to Peter Pan Donuts way too often. Yes.
Okay. Something you're missing out on, Ralph. Okay, that's all I can say.
Over a lifetime, I've missed out on so much. God knows.
Well, Peter Pan is a page out of New York's history. Really, it's a old-fashioned donut shop, which you just don't see much of anymore. And as a matter of fact, since I've been here, you've had any number of Dunkin' Donuts spring up on Manhattan Avenue all around it, but it's still hanging in there. The waitresses still wear these lime green, outfits, and they bake, on premises and all that stuff. So it's one of Greenpoint's oldest surviving institutions today.
Beautiful. Hey, John, you've been tremendous. I want to ask you if you have some sort of take on opening day week, if you have any, not predictions so much as just impressions and what opening day means to you, what maybe you could tell us about your first opening day, your first game.
Let's see. Yeah, I've got a couple good stories. I mean, my first game, the first game I remember being at was, and I believe I've been to one or two before, but I have no specific memories. But the game that I remember, and you guys will remember this game as well, 1973, Met Braves. My dad took us out there because, it was an opportunity to see Willie Mays against Hank Aaron. And, of course, what we did see was Don Hahn and George Theodore collide in left center field. Do you remember that?
Wow,
and
I do. Absolutely.
Ralph Garr hit a line drive, and those two guys ran into one another and could barely pick themselves up off the ground. The ball was out in the left field corner, and Rusty Staub had to come all the way along from right field to pick the ball in. And I remember, an inside the park home run, and two guys get carried off the field in stretchers. So that was one of the first games I can remember seeing. I went to an opening day once. I think it was a home opener, not an opening day, where Dave Kingman hit a home run. It might have been Kingman's first day as a Met, and they beat the Phillies 2-1 or 3-1. It was Seaver versus Carlton out there. As for this year, I'm optimistic for the team, but I got to tell you, last year they had such a great spring training, and even when they looked awful, early in the season, I was a little bit, I felt, confident that they could eventually get it together based on what a nice spring they'd had. And, this year the spring training for the Mets was terrible. They looked awful. They played terribly. So it doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't fill me with confidence at the same time. So I was happy to see them get a split in Kansas City.
Yes, I was very happy. That second game was, we were talking about that before you got here, just incredible for them and for, for Familiar and Walker, basically. That,
yep. Syndergaard's going to be very, very fun to watch this year. So
yeah.
I'd like to see the offense get their act together a little bit because they haven't really hit much yet. But obviously when you got a great pitching staff like they do right now, I think they're it's going to be one of those deals where they're over the course of a long season they're going to be able to sort of overwhelm the other guys and take two out of three in most of these series and I think they're going to be fine. But it is I'm a little bit more worried than I would like to be at this point of the year, just because I haven't seen the offense do anything. I'm a little bit scared of Cespedes playing the whole season in center field, that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm optimistic. I think we'll be there at the end.
Beautiful, and I hope you'll come back from time to time and check in with us and just chat, because you're charming and you got a great idea. The three of us, me, you, and Dennis, love your idea.
Well, great. Well, I hope you get the book. It's coming out in June.
No, absolutely will. When I say the three of us, me, you, and Dennis, who had made the first. Did you ever get to meet him?
Dennis? Oh, Dennis D'Agostino, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I communicated with him through email. He was a guy. I think his role. He had. I think he was like an assistant in the to the public relations people in the 70s, and He did that work for the Mets, and he actually did that for the Knicks for a long time, and then I believe he's in California now.
Oh, really?
I think you might be able to reach him. I'll try to find an email from you. I'll shoot ahead his address if you ever want to have him on as a guest.
I would definitely.
He's a very knowledgeable guy.
Yeah.
And he wrote the book, which helped me write the book, no doubt.
All right. And I hope it's a big seller for you, and I hope you do great, because
well, thanks very much.
It's a labor of love, but it's a task.
Yeah, it was. I tell you, it was fun doing it a second time. Really, even more so than the first time, because I knew how I could do it a little bit better. So I think anyone who got the first book would enjoy the second book even more. So that's what I'm hoping.
My memory of number 5 is that Hobie Landreth wore number 5, and I was just a kid when the Mets were formed. And you look at the Yankees. Joe DiMaggio was number 5. Who's the number 5 for the Mets? Oh, Hobie Landreth. I can remember that. Thinking that the significance of it all. 5 was my favorite number, so it wasn't easy being a Met fan in those early days. I can assure you.
Well, the only reason I knew that Claypool wore number 7 was because Mickey Mantle wore number 7. So because see what Ralph is like was into the uniform numbers. I have to confess, I'm lost with most uniform numbers, but of course I knew Mickey Mantle's, and when I was young, I noticed Claypool exactly. So
what's fun about numbers? Yeah. I mean, you can look today at a guy like Stephen Mann, and if you squint or you look the right way, you can see John Matlack. At least I can. Left-handed pitcher, number 32. You know what I mean? It's there. So that's sort of what I like about it, and that's sort of the genesis of the book. This is one guy to the next guy to the next guy, right there.
And also the receivers was totally random. They gave him 41. They had a bunch of pitchers come in, and they in consecutive numbers. Caldwell was there, and they just gave him 41, and he took it, and that was it. And it turns out to be a Hall of Famer. And he's probably the only 41 you can think of.
Even though there were 5 guys before Seaver who wore 41, right?
Was Darryl Sutherland one of them?
I might have been. Let me. I can look this up. I'm cheating here, but I remember one of them. He was sort of famous or infamous. Grover Powell. He was a favorite of Stengel, who thought he was a little bit of a goofball. But let me see. Anyway, one of the cool things I did with this book was we figured out the combined statistics of everybody who ever wore a particular number. So I know that I got the numbers up here. Clem Labine, or is it Clem Labine? I don't even know how to pronounce it.
Clem Labine, yes, former Brooklyn Dodger.
Right. He was the first 41, and he had it for a couple of weeks in 1962. Grover Powell in 63. Jim Bethke in 65.
Jim who? I'm sorry.
Bethke. He was there for about 4 months in 1965, and then he gave it over to Gordy Richardson later that year, and he wore it through 66.
Okay.
So those were the 4 guys who wore 41 before Seaver, and they combined for 5 wins and 5 losses in their career. So
combined.
Yeah. So I believe that number 41 still has the most victories of any uniform number ever worn by a Met, but Seaver's got all but 5 of them.
Nice. Thank you, John. Hey, Wayne,
right,
thank
guys.
you. This is fun. As usual, we got this thing going, and one of the highlights of my life is getting to talk sports with my buddies. And thank you, John. You'll
all right,
come back
thanks for having me, guys. Anytime.
Beautiful.
Thanks for coming on, John. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We enjoy talking at you. And please respond to us on Facebook or look at our website, comfortablyzonedradionetwork.com, comfortablyzoneradio.com. And, Wayne, we have a sponsor. Tally makes soaps. That's our sponsor. She makes glycerin soap. And if you go to the website, you get to see pictures of her soap. Wayne, she made me soap. They have now a little mold of Met caps. We haven't seen any others on the internet yet, but you get a hat, comes out of soap. She blue with a little NY. It's unbelievable. So,
wow.
You still with us?
I'm
Wayne,
still with you. I'm like, yeah.
I wash
with
a Met cap, a piece of soap.
Wow.
It's a great life. She treats me like I'm in a hospice. I mean, it's amazing. I haven't been sick a day in my life, and it's the first. It's one. Tally, I love you, sweetie. If you ever listen to this, which she's not likely to. Thanks, everybody out there.
Well, Ralph, she treats you that way because she can count.
Right. She knows that it won't be long.
She knows how old you are.
Right. Yes, Wayne. Very nice. I told you that I'm 69, but I feel younger because 69 is the new 67.
Oh, listen, I'm not that far behind you. I'm 61. I'm not that far behind you, but
you'll catch me.
Honestly, well, it's funny. I saw some little video. I'm going to make this really quick. I know we're closing, but I saw this little video the other day, and this guy says, okay, he goes, if John is 4 and his younger brother is Joe is half his age, how old is he? And his girlfriend says 2. And he goes, well, how old will Joe be when John is 100? And she goes, 50. and this thing went on and on for a while. Like, well, when he's 100, he's half his age. It's half of 150. But anyway, so that's when you said, I'm catching up, or I'll catch up. That immediately shot into my mind. At some point, everybody catches up to us.
Just
at some
the
point.
idea that I'm 69. I swear to God, on the inside, I'll walk by a mirror and I'll go, but on the inside, I'm still walking around like I'm 30. Just bopping. And
you and me both.
Let's keep it that way, my man.
I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. We're going to be over and out, and just remind everybody to, life's a roller coaster. Try to keep it on an even keel, and keep on keeping on. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Good night, Ralph.